In a world where naval supremacy is often measured by the silent deterrence of steel in nuclear power, the unthinkable has finally occurred in the volatile waters of the Persian Gulf, shifting the paradigm of modern maritime warfare forever. At exactly 2:33 local time, under a moonless sky that offered no hint of the impending catastrophe, the USS Gerald R. Ford, the most technologically advanced and expensive warship ever constructed, was struck by a direct missile impact that has sent shockwaves through every naval command center from Washington to Beijing. This was not a near miss, nor was it a psychological demonstration of force where a warhead detonates hundreds of meters away to rattle the hull. This was a kinetic, direct, and devastating penetration of the United States Navy's premier symbol of global power projection. The weapon utilized in this brazen assault has been identified by intelligence analysts as a modified Khalij-Fars anti-ship ballistic missile, a potent weapon in the Iranian arsenal that had been specifically retrofitted with a delayed action penetration warhead designed for one singular purpose: to defeat the layered defenses and heavy armor of a supercarrier. The missile originated from a Mobile Transporter Erector Launcher, or TEL platform, hidden within the rugged, contested terrain of Abu Musa Island. As the missile streaked across the horizon at hypersonic speeds, it bypassed the outer perimeter of the Carrier Strike Group's Aegis defense net, slamming into the Ford's flight deck on the port side. The impact was surgical and violent. The delayed action fuse allowed the projectile to punch through the reinforced steel of the flight deck, cutting through 3 successive interior decks before its massive high-explosive payload finally detonated deep within the ship's infrastructure. The resulting explosion initiated a ferocious conflagration within the hangar bay, a space filled with highly flammable jet fuel, ordnance, and some of the world's most sophisticated electronic hardware. For 47 harrowing minutes, the ship's damage control teams fought a desperate battle against a wall of flame and toxic smoke, struggling to contain a fire that threatened to consume the very heart of the vessel. When the smoke finally cleared, the toll was heavy and visible. 4 F/A 18F Super Hornets were reduced to charred skeletons of titanium and composite. 19 sailors were injured with varying degrees of severity, and 2 members of the crew were confirmed dead, their lives taken in the initial blast. This event marks the most significant combat damage inflicted upon a United States aircraft carrier since the end of the Second World War. Yet, the story of the USS Gerald R. Ford on this night is not merely one of victimization, but one of an almost supernatural level of resilience and a terrifyingly efficient retaliatory capability. To understand the gravity of this event, one must look past the flames and into the architecture of the ship itself. Because while Iran may have achieved a tactical milestone, they inadvertently triggered a sequence of events that would see their own strategic assets systematically dismantled in less than half an hour. The USS Gerald R. Ford is not simply a boat. It is a 4.5-acre floating city, a fortress of steel divided into more than 2,000 independent, watertight compartments. This modular design is intended specifically for this scenario, to absorb combat damage and remain mission-capable. While the fire raged in the aft hangar, the forward sections of the ship remained remarkably untouched. The ship's dual-band radar systems continue to sweep the skies, and more importantly, its revolutionary electromagnetic aircraft launch system, or EMALS, remained fully energized. The Ford's nuclear propulsion remained at 100% capacity, providing the massive amounts of electricity needed to both fight the fire and continue the fight. The Iranian military commanders who celebrated the sight of smoke rising from the Ford's port side may have underestimated the sheer redundancy built into a carrier of this class. Even as the hangar bay was a zone of chaos and heroism, the forward flight deck was a scene of clinical, cold-blooded preparation. At 2:41, just 8 minutes after the missile had breached its hull, the Ford did something that few naval experts thought possible. It launched its first retaliatory strike. A Super Hornet roared off the forward catapult, disappearing into the night air while the smell of burning JP-5 fuel still hung heavy over the deck. This rapid pivot from defense to offense was made possible by a critical failure in the Iranian operation, a failure born of the very physics of their launch. When the Khalij Fars missile was launched from its mobile platform on Abu Musa, its solid-fuel rocket motor emitted a massive thermal signature, a blooming flower of heat that was instantly detected by the United States Space-Based Infrared System, or SBIRS. These high-orbit satellites are calibrated to detect the heat of a single candle from space, and the launch of a ballistic missile provided a signature so bright and clear that it was localized with a precision of less than 8 meters in just 3 seconds. By the time the Iranian missile was mid-flight toward its target, the American combat systems already knew exactly where it had come from. The data was fed instantly into the Ford's integrated combat system, bypassing traditional chains of command to provide the carrier's commander with a target before the impact had even occurred. This was the fatal irony of the Iranian success. By hitting the Ford, they had handed over the exact coordinates of the very assets they used to conduct the strike. What followed was the most concentrated and lethal response of the entire conflict. The American retaliatory doctrine was not one of gradual escalation, but of total neutralization. At 2:34, 1 minute after impact, the satellite coordinates were confirmed and distributed to every asset in the carrier strike group. At 2:35, the authorization for a lethal reprisal was granted. By 2:36, the first Super Hornet was being positioned on catapult number 1. As the aircraft climbed into the darkness at 2:41, it was carrying a payload of GBU-31 JDAM satellite-guided bombs, each one slaved to the coordinates provided by the SBIRS satellites. But the air wing was not acting alone. At 2:44, while the fire in the hangar was still being fought by sailors in silver heat suits, 2 escorting destroyers positioned 85 kilometers away launched a volley of Harpoon Block II anti-ship missiles. These sea-skimming projectiles were programmed to strike the coastal battery positions on Abu Musa, ensuring that no second missile could be launched. 3 minutes later, at 2:47, the silent hunters of the deep joined the fray as Virginia-class nuclear-powered attack submarines launched a barrage of Tomahawk Block V cruise missiles. These weapons were not aimed at the launch platform itself, which was already being hunted by the aircraft, but at the supporting infrastructure. The hardened command bunkers, the fuel depots, and the communication arrays that coordinated the island's defense. The coordination was seamless, a symphony of destruction that bridged space, sea, and subsurface domains. At 2:50, the Super Hornet from the Ford arrived over Abu Musa, its ATF LIR targeting pod confirming that the mobile TEL platform was still in its launch position, likely preparing a second round of fire. 1 minute later, the pilot released 2 heavy JDAMs, but they would never even hit their target. At 2:52, the Harpoon missiles from the destroyers arrived first, slamming into the TEL platform in a spectacular display of kinetic energy. The platform, along with its crew and any remaining ordnance, was vaporized instantly. Seconds later, the Tomahawk missiles began their terminal dives into the island's facilities. The control bunker was hit by 3 successive warheads, collapsing the reinforced concrete and silencing the Iranian command and control network in the sector. The fuel depots detonated in a chain reaction that could be seen for miles, and by 2:56, just 23 minutes after the fort had been struck, the entire offensive and defensive capability of Abu Musa Island had been systematically erased from the map. Back on the fort, the battle against the elements was also being won. By 3:20, the damage control teams had successfully contained the hangar fire. The damage sections were sealed off, and while the aft flight deck was declared unusable, the ship's overall mission capability remained surprisingly high. An official damage assessment, completed by 400, revealed that while the fort had lost 35% of its nominal air operations capacity due to the damage in the aft sector, it still possessed 65% of its striking power through its forward elevators and catapults. It remained the most potent naval asset in the Persian Gulf, a bruised but undefeated titan. The geopolitical fallout of this night is only just beginning to be understood. For Iran, the impact was the single greatest tactical achievement in their naval history, proving that a high-end carrier is not invulnerable to a determined and technologically capable adversary. They destroyed nearly $300 million worth of aircraft and struck a blow to the perceived invincibility of the American flag. However, the cost of that success was staggering. Not only did they lose their most valuable coastal battery and its supporting infrastructure in less than half an hour, but they also handed the United States the ultimate political and moral justification for a wider campaign. In the hours following the strike, the United States utilized the unprovoked attack on its sovereign territory, which a carrier is legally considered to be, to launch a series of strategic strikes against the interior manufacturing plants where the Kalish Fars missiles are produced. By succeeding in hitting the fort, Iran inadvertently triggered the total destruction of the very program that allowed them to do so. This raises a fundamental question about the nature of modern conflict. Is a tactical success worth a strategic suicide? The Iranian leadership may have sought to demonstrate American weakness, but in doing so, they demonstrated the terrifying speed and precision of American retaliation. The fort's ability to launch a counterstrike while its own hangar was on fire is a testament to the engineering of the vessel and the training of its crew, a reality that likely sits heavily on the minds of military planners in Tehran. The strike on the fort was a historic event, but it was also a masterclass in the difference between winning a battle and losing a war. The Kalish Fars missile took 4 minutes to reach the fort and change the course of history, but it took the fort only 8 minutes to prove that it could hit back harder even while bleeding. As we look at the blackened steel of the fort's port side and the smoking ruins of Abu Musa, we are forced to reckon with a new reality of naval warfare where the first blow is no longer a guarantee of victory, but often a countdown to a much more devastating conclusion. The USS Gerald R fort has proven that it can take a hit and keep fighting, but the question remains whether the international community can withstand the escalating tensions that such a direct confrontation creates. For now, the fort remains on station, its forward catapults still launching aircraft into the hazy Gulf air, a reminder that in the game of high-stakes naval brinkmanship, the greatest mistake one can make is to succeed at the wrong time and against the wrong target. The strategic calculus has been reset, and the world now waits to see if this was the climax of a conflict or merely the opening salvo of a much larger and more destructive engagement. The silence of the Persian Gulf has been broken, replaced by the roar of jet engines and the grim reality of a superpower that has been stung and is now fully awake. As the investigation into the technical failures of the escort screen continues, the primary takeaway for every nation watching is clear. The Gerald R. Ford is a ship designed to survive the unsurvivable, and its response to being wounded was far more dangerous than the ship itself was in a state of peace. This was the most expensive mistake Iran has made in decades. A tactical victory that became a strategic catastrophe, proving once and for all that while you can hit a king, you had better be prepared for what happens when the king decides to hit back. The implications for future carrier operations are profound, suggesting that the era of the supercarrier is far from over. Instead, it has entered a new, more violent, and more resilient chapter. The fire in the hangar has been extinguished, but the fires of this conflict are burning hotter than ever, fueled by the wreckage of aircraft and the smoldering remains of an island fortress that thought it could strike the heart of the American fleet and survive the morning. In the cold light of day, the score is clear. Iran achieved the impossible, but in doing so, they lost everything they used to achieve it, and gave their adversary exactly what was needed to finish the job they started.